Good morning. Welcome to the Unitarian Society of New Haven. For those of you here in the sanctuary, as well as online via Zoom or YouTube. I am Rich Stockton, a member of the worship committee and your worship associate today. You can refer to me with the pronouns he and him. If you're joining us for the first time, we're so glad you chose to spend this time with us. We are a diverse, multi-generational faith community that inspires lives of compassion and generosity, nurtures spiritual growth, cultivates transformative connections, and creates a more just world. This is a congregation that believes in the right of all people to make decisions about their own health care and about their own gender identity. We believe that Black lives matter and that all people are inherently worthy. We're deeply grateful for those that make our service happen. We have our tech team, which is Rob and Larry today, and our entire music, Sunday morning welcome, and religious education teams. For those of you visiting us for the first time, or those who are relatively new to USNH and who may have questions, we'd love to get to know you. You are welcome to grab a cup of coffee or tea and join members of the Connections team at the visitors table in the far right corner of the social hall after the service. You can also contact us by email at membership@usnh.org, or you can go to our website, usnh.org, to find out more about us. I have quite a few announcements this morning. If you're having trouble hearing, our hearing assist devices are available as you come into the sanctuary. If you have to leave for any reason, know that our social hall is wired for sound. Now, after today's service, author Nicholas Davidoff will be in the social hall where he'll be signing copies of The Other Side of Prospect. Possible Futures Bookstore will be selling the book, which you may also purchase for donation to New Haven literacy nonprofits. At noon today in this sanctuary, Darcy Jeffrey welcomes all of you to Spirit Dance, an open time for free movement, accompanied by a specially curated music playlist. A Sundays at 4 concert will be held in this sanctuary this afternoon with our own William Braun on piano and Sergio Palatelli on flute. On behalf of the stewardship team, we remind you, and that we will remind you again, that the stewardship campaign is almost finished. You will see the stewardship table in the social hall. Please join Connect and other allies in protesting the Lamont administration's mishandling and implementing the state's clean slate laws. The governor promised in 2023 to get it done this year, and still tens of thousands of people are waiting to be able to move on with their lives. So on this Wednesday, March 27th at 10 a.m., a protest and press conference will take place at the state capitol. Connect is providing a bus and a lunch from USNH to and from this important event. Please contact Kenny Foscue, who will be available after the service to sign up. Kenny, are you here? Just to...
Yes, and it's a free bus. It's a free lunch. Very important.
Thank you. And after a 10-year pause, the tradition of the USNH annual Labor Day retreat has been revived. Actually, it's the almost Labor Day retreat. Consider joining a fun weekend at Camp Chimney Corners in Beckett, Massachusetts, from Friday, August 23rd through Sunday, August 25th. Holly Hawkins and Jim Bond will be in the social hall today for more information. Holly or Jim, are you here? Jim, it'll be coming later. So, anyway, and please read the announcements. They're most, if not all of them, in your order of service. And finally, let's make sure we have silenced our electronic devices. Today, our Love Talk, LOVE stands for Living Our Values Every Day, will be about early voting in Connecticut. And that'll be by Lorleen DeVos.
Good morning. You are a good trouble congregation. I am Lurleen DeVos, a member of the USNH UU the Vote Electoral Justice Team, with many colleagues, including my Pam Miller. My pronouns are she and her. Our team is working with you to promote and protect our democracy, nationally and locally. USNH became a good trouble congregation in 2022 as a result of your commitment to justice and your hard work. The Good Trouble Congregation program is an effort of the UUA's Side with Love movement to reach out to 3 million voters this year. We connected with 2 million in 2020 during the pandemic. We can do this. As Unitarian Universalists, we can do this. This year, this congregation is off to a great start. Through your efforts, we will soon achieve our first 2024 Good Trouble milestone, as we've completed over 6,000 postcards. But please wait to mail them until April 22nd, so they're there just in time for folks to make sure that they vote in their primary. Our second milestone will be fulfilled when 2 of our team members serve as poll workers on April 2nd. If you are also working the polls or you're interested in working the polls, please let us know and we can facilitate that with you, give you the info you need in order to make sure there are enough folks there to ensure that the process goes forward. Locally, many of the bills in the current Connecticut legislative session address issues that call us as Unitarian Universalists to live our values out loud by contacting our legislators. Paid sick leave for all workers, SB 7. One fair wage rather than the sub-minimum tipped wage currently paid restaurant servers, SB 221. And Husky for immigrants, as well as bills addressing the climate crisis, are at stake. Come to the UU the Vote table after the service to get more information on the bills. We have pre-stamped postcards and contact information for your legislators, so it's easy for you to contact them. Please use your voice to support UU values in our state. We are also called to hold our elected representatives accountable to execute the laws that are passed. Unfortunately, that hasn't been the case with the clean slate legislation, as you just heard. We backed that through our membership in Connect. So this Wednesday, we are called to join with the Connect protest and press conference that will be held at the south end of the Capitol. It's going to address the delays in implementing this legislation. Connect needs 60 folks to turn out. We have a reputation as Unitarian Universalists for showing up. We can do this. A bus will be going from New Haven, and Kenny will be at the UU The Vote table to provide the information you need to be a part of the movement. Finally, also, this coming week, for the first time in Connecticut, we are going to have the opportunity to vote early beginning Tuesday. If you need information about where and when you can vote early, come by our table. Please try to take advantage of this opportunity to help our town clerks and registrars work out kinks and details of early voting before November. We can use this to kind of pilot it so that it goes smoothly in November and there won't be any nonsense. Thank you for joining us in making good trouble to promote and protect our democracy.
So Louise, stay here, because you're going to light our chalice. Now, I've known for about 3 weeks the subject of our sermon today. I'm Reverend Stephen Kendrick. My pronouns are he and him. But I couldn't think of the joke. I just couldn't. I tried for 3 weeks, and this morning, and Liz will swear this is true, this morning it finally popped into my head. One theoretical physicist said, "Is the world made of mind? Doesn't matter. Is the world made of matter? Never mind." But in that spirit, we do celebrate the mind, the matter, the world, the gift that is before us in the Song of Solomon. And now we shall light our chalice. For now the winter is past. The rain is over and gone. The flowers appear on the earth, and the time of singing has come. The fig tree puts forth its figs, and the vines are in blossom, and they give forth fragrance. For all these gifts of life, we give thanks, and I invite forward Sonny to lead us in our society in statement.
Good morning. My name is Sunny McMillan. I am the ministerial intern here at USNH. My pronouns are she and her. So this is usually the point in the service where we read our covenant. But today, and from time to time going forward, we will instead be reading the USNH ends statement. Our ends come out of policy governance. They are a living document. And as our board president, Bobby Pace, explains it, ends are about what difference we are making for whom. So where our mission statement may be a little bit more broad and amorphous, our end statement are what we are concretely committing to do. So I invite you now to read along with me the end statement printed in your order of service. The people of the Unitarian Society of New Haven are called to work within ourselves, with others in our faith community, and beyond in the wider world, to boldly seek opportunities to grow, learn, and worship, embracing the transformative power of connecting to that which is larger than ourselves. Joyfully welcome all who enter our doors as we affirm and embrace diversity of thought, orientation, and lifestyle. Generously give and receive support in times of joy, sorrow, and transition. Responsibly dismantle oppression in ourselves and our institutions, including USNH. Tenaciously engage in spiritual and applied practices that promote ecological sustainability and environmental justice. And now I invite you to rise in body or spirit as we sing hymn number 300, With Heart and Mind.
Good morning, my name is Jesse Greist. I'm the Director of Lifespan Religious Education here. My pronouns are he and him. And I wanted to tell you about three people that I had a chance to get to know. They are good friends. Their names are Carol, Meryl, and Harold. And they meet together in the social hour of their congregation after worship every week. And they begin to talk about, what they saw, what they thought about, and kind of give their commentary, as some of us are wont to do. And the thing about them that you need to know is that Carol was the kind of person who, in her life, had really had a whole lot of really tough things happen to her. She had lived her childhood on a steady diet of cortisol. She had really experienced some very tough things growing up and even in her adult life. And so a lot of times, Carol's orientation towards the world was a little bit defensive. Now, Meryl was the type of person who had had an average okay life, but really kind of wanted to keep herself very safe. She was very concerned about safety. So that was kind of her orientation to the world. And Harold was the consummate optimist. Not really much bad had ever happened to Harold. So Harold was the kind of person who always saw the glass half full, always had rose-colored glasses. And this is kind of a story about what happens when the three of them get together. So one day after the service, they're standing there and they're having their usual conversation, talking about the sermon and the quality of the food and, all sorts of things like that. And all of a sudden, Meryl gets a text from their child who's downstairs in the childcare. And the text reads, "I saw a man outside with binoculars." Well, Carol immediately said, "We need to get out there and confront that man and figure out what's going on." Meryl said, "Hold on just a second. We need to go down and make sure that my kid is safe first. We're not going anything outside." And Harold said, "Oh, how nice. I guess he must just be doing some bird watching." Well, they decided after a little bit of back and forth that they were going to run downstairs to the childcare and see what was going on. And when they all rushed into the childcare room, "Are you okay? Is everything going on? Is everything okay here?" Meryl's child held up a pair of binoculars and said, "I saw a man outside with binoculars." Oh. I guess everything's fine. Okay, we'll see you in a few minutes. We're going to go get some more coffee. The next week, Carol, Meryl, and Harold were again up in the social hall following their service. And this time, Harold had brought in a cake to share with everybody that he had made at home. It was a big, beautiful cake. And the pieces of the cake were cut up. They were given out to everybody in the congregation. And people came by and nodded approvingly, and, the whole cake went, and someone came up and handed a note to Harold. And Harold opened up the note and said, "I have never tasted a cake like that in my life." And Harold said, "Oh, that is the nicest thing anyone has ever said to me." And Carol said, "What are you talking about? They just gave you the worst insult that could have possibly happened. They absolutely hated your cake and didn't want to tell you." And Meryl said, "Well, I don't know. It's probably in between the two. I'm not quite sure about that." Now, one takeaway from a story like this could be that it's important to use very precise language in this world. But another takeaway can be that each of us, every once in a while, needs to take a moment to think about how our personal orientation in this world, our experiences, the things that set us up, can affect how we receive information, how we approach situations. Our mindset, in many ways, becomes the world that we perceive. So with that in mind, let's bring our children up to our classes with Go Now in Peace, and we will continue with our service. Would you please sing with me, Go Now in Peace? Go now in peace, go now in peace.
Everywhere you may go. Go now in peace, may the everywhere you may go. There are so many reasons that we gather here on Sunday. We've touched on them a little bit: story and music, social justice. But for the joys and concerns that often bring us into community and hold us, if you have anything that you would like to share or a burden that you would like someone to hold with you, you can reach out to our pastoral team. You can call the church office. Jamie is always ready to talk with you, and then transfer you on to me. I would love getting direct calls from you if you need my assistance, or in any sense, anyone to share your joy and your sorrow. Bjorn and Barbara, I know that this is your last Sunday with us for a while. Like MacArthur, ye shall return, and we wish you well in your sojourn in Sweden. We will miss you. But it's also wonderful that I've had the opportunity to get to know you. We have had a blessed birth. Please, applause. Kevin and Alyssa Chapin, and Alyssa was at the board meeting last Thursday night, which is more than I can say for myself. They are happy to announce that they have a 5-pound, 14-ounce baby boy, little Bowie U. Chapin, to join little big brother Roland. And Bowie was born on Thursday. And great congratulations and hallelujahs for the family. Yeah. and, as life gives us, a sorrow. Carol Stockton asks for your thoughts and prayers as she and her family prepare for a service next Sunday for her twin, Judy McVetti. It'll be at the Sisk Funeral Home on Whitney Avenue, 3 o'clock on Saturday, March 30th. And I want to invite Rich back up to speak a little bit about Judy, his sister-in-law. Rich?
Thank you, Stephen. Well, actually, I thought just, it's one hand, it's nice. I'm the worship associate. I get to write the script. And, but it's still, I did want to remember Carol's twin sister, and was my sister-in-law, Judy McVeety. And, you know, she was a great friend of USNH. She never joined, but she came to many concerts and events. She particularly loved Bill. And she addressed many postcards. One thing I remember specifically, she worked at and contributed regularly to Columbus House. We sadly haven't been doing that recently. She helped make costumes for many plays. Again, I specifically remember all those Winkies. Those, if you were there, you know what I'm talking about. And in recent years, when she couldn't get around much, she would follow the services on Zoom. So anyway, her humor, her kindness, her generosity, and her skill at word and board games, they won't be forgotten. She will be missed. And with that, I would like to do the spoken meditation. It's called Gentleness in Living by Reverend Richard S. Gilbert. Be gentle with one another. It is a cry from the lives of people battered by thoughtless words and brutal deeds. It comes from the lips of those who speak them and the lives of those who do them. Who of us can look inside another and know what is there of hope and hurt, or promise and pain? Who can know from what far places each has come, or to what far places each may hope to go? Our lives are like fragile eggs. They crack and the substance escapes. Handle with care. Handle with exceedingly tender care, for there are human beings within, human beings as vulnerable as we are, who feel as we feel, who hurt as we hurt. Life is too transient to be cruel with one another. It is too short for thoughtlessness, too brief for hurting. Life is long enough for caring. It is lasting enough for sharing, precious enough for love. Be gentle with one another. Let's take a moment of silence.
There are opportunities to give in our life. Every week, the offering. We appreciate when you give of your life's labor and idealism. There are lots of ways you can do it. You can do it on your phone. You can do it as you leave by either door. You can send in a mailed contribution. However you do, we appreciate it. But that's every week. But once a year, we need your pledge too. And I know that there are some folks that haven't gotten their pledge in, and they've pledged every year for a long, long time. And there will be people out in the social hall more than happy to receive your pledge. But new pledges matter more than you can possibly guess. I will be frank with you. Liz and I weren't necessarily planning to pledge here, but today we are going to. Because I believe in this place. And new pledges matter. If you've never pledged before, today's a good day. And I will emphasize this with the religious parable. I'm not sure what gospel it's from, but apparently a chicken and a pig are walking down the road together. And the chicken says, pig, we should start a breakfast restaurant. And the pig stops and thinks and says, chicken, for you that's a contribution, for me that's a sacrifice. That is possibly the worst segue ever devised for our offertory. Sometimes I feel like a motherless child. William, make it come true. Thank you.
Our reading today is a responsive reading. If you'd like to participate, it is number 657 in your gray hymnal. It matters what we believe. And if you do want to participate, I will read the plain text and you can respond with the italicized text. Some beliefs are like walled gardens. They encourage exclusiveness and the feeling of being especially privileged. Some beliefs are like shadows, clouding children's days with fears of unknown calamities. Some beliefs are divisive, separating the saved from the unsaved, friends from enemies. Some beliefs are like blinders, shutting off the power to choose one's own direction. Some beliefs weaken a person's selfhood. They blight the growth of resourcefulness. Some beliefs are rigid, like the body of death, impotent in a changing world. And now the USNH choir. So before I dive in this morning, I just want to take a moment to thank the mind. What we explore today may feel at times a tad critical, and so before we dive in, thank you, mind, for all you do to keep us safe on this journey in the world. And here we go. In my class this semester on Mahayana Buddhism, we are taking a deep dive into the Buddhist text, The Way of the Bodhisattva. It was written by monk, philosopher, and poet Shantideva in approximately the 8th century. It is one of the great classics of Mahayana Buddhism, and it outlines the path of the Bodhisattva, those beings who forego the peace of their own salvation and enlightenment, and instead vow to stick around with the rest of us until all achieve enlightenment. Now, before we dove into the book, our professor explained that this is a text that is designed to transform the reader, to bring into the world, by reading it, an enlightened being. And I got pretty excited. What secret and esoteric information would we be encountering in this ancient and revered text that could, if we allowed it, give us the state of enlightenment? As it turns out, the magic was not so metaphysical. For Shantideva, the magic to an enlightened state lies largely in managing the mind. Shantideva sums up his position succinctly, stating, "There is no greater bane than mind itself." Perhaps you relate. I know I did when I read that. But Shantideva does not stop there. He goes on emphatically and vividly to write, "Wandering where it will, the elephant of mind will bring us down in the torment and hell of unrelenting pain. No worldly beast, no matter how wild and crazed, could bring upon us such calamities as the mind. Tigers, lions, elephants, and bears, snakes, and every hostile foe, those who guard the prisoners in hell, ghosts and ghouls, and every evil wraith. By simple binding of this mind alone, all these things are likewise bound. By simple taming of this mind alone, all these things are likewise tamed." And this is but one example from the text. Shantideva mentions the mind about 200 times in this short 9-chapter book. Even the 14th Dalai Lama's commentary on this book mirrors Shantideva's sentiments. The Dalai Lama writes, "All suffering in this life and others is created by the unsubdued mind." Now, when I read The Way of the Bodhisattva and found out it is in large part all about managing the mind, I felt two things: validated and excited. And I'll tell you why, and I'm going to do so using a story from my own life. And stay with me. I promise this will all relate to minding your mind. And I do want to make a quick disclaimer before we go further. When I speak of managing the mind, I want to recognize that for those living with or under the diagnosis of a true mental health disorder, they may not have the capacity to choose what is going on inside their minds. So for our purposes today, I just want to let you know I am speaking about those who are operating without a psychological impairment. Now, back to my story. As many of you know, I am divorced. My husband and I were both strong-willed attorneys, and while our life looked really good on paper, our marriage was hard. There was a lot of conflict, and we had a lot of therapy. Ultimately, I left the marriage on a wave of anger and resentment. But several years post-divorce, with a bit of space, my fury, like a wave, had receded. I found myself in unexpected grief, sadness, and guilt. We'd opted for a collaborative divorce and did our best to be amicable, but we were hardly on speaking terms, and we each carried big feelings and deep wounds. And it was around this time that my spiritual journey began in earnest. And along the way, a cherished mentor introduced me to the work of Byron Katie and her form of self-inquiry. It would end up transforming not only my relationship with my ex-husband, but no exaggeration, my life. The whole premise of her work revolved around questioning the thoughts and beliefs that caused me to suffer. Now, questioning one's thoughts may not sound revolutionary to you out there, especially those of you who are practicing mental health professionals who do some form of cognitive behavioral therapy. But for me, it was a game changer and turned my world upside down in the best of ways. So for years, both during and after my marriage, I'd held a few choice thoughts about my ex-husband that often played on a loop in my mind. Thoughts like, he should have cared more. He should not have been so hot-tempered and angry. He just wanted to control me. And those are just the ones I'm comfortable sharing in polite company. I held on to these thoughts with a white-knuckle death grip, and every time I thought them, a new wave of anger and resentment would flow through my body. And then I would review all of the evidence as to why these thoughts were true. I could have easily filled a lengthy legal brief with all the reasons why he should have cared more, why he shouldn't have been so angry, and why he was so controlling. But these thoughts did not make me feel very good, and they weren't doing much to heal my relationship with my ex. So when I encountered Katie's system of inquiry, I thought, what the hell? Nothing else had worked. What could it hurt? Soon I began to question all those thoughts. Could I absolutely know my ex-husband should have cared more? How did it make me feel when I was believing those thoughts? And the best part, just exploring whether the opposite of all those painful thoughts might be as true or even truer. By questioning those thoughts, it began to create a small crack in my story about my ex-husband. And in that opening, light began to pour in, illuminating my mind. For example, my staunch belief that he should have cared more might become, I, Sonny, should have cared more. Could I find anywhere in the relationship where that could have been true? Yes, repeatedly. In fact, when I got really honest with myself and got down to the truthiest truth, I think he actually cared more than I did. No wonder he was angry. This exploration just snowballed, and suddenly all those resentful and angry thoughts became their opposite. I, Sonny, should not have been so angry. I, Sonny, might have been trying to control him too. I realized I was no longer a victim, but a co-creator in our marital misery. The result? I was deeply sorry for my actions. And while I had no control over his side of our marital street, I did have control over my ability to clean my side of the marital street. Long story short, I shared my realizations with my ex-husband who, after some initial shock, received my apologies with a lot of grace and, shockingly, made a few apologies of his own. All this paved the way for a beautiful post-divorce friendship that lasted until his passing in 2018. The other gift of this whole exercise was the realization that I had a lot more control over what goes on between my ears than I previously realized. And this control extended to areas of my life well beyond marriage and divorce. And I'm just going to use a simple example here that I think could apply to just about anyone out there: sharing the road with other drivers. In a past chapter of my life, when someone cut me off, my immediate reaction was something along the lines of, what a blankety blank jerk, accompanied by a surge of adrenaline and anger. And I would ruminate and stew on it for hours afterward. With self-inquiry, however, I realized the thought that they were a jerk might not be true. When I explored turning that thought around, things got real. Have I ever been a jerk while driving? Yeah. And maybe they're not a jerk. Maybe they're rushing to the side of their beloved who is giving birth to their first child. Or maybe they just got fired and they're a bit mad and distracted. The alternative possibilities to my limited thinking were endless, as was the newfound peace and compassion available to me. I realized that when my mind was properly managed, I did not have to suffer at the hands of my runaway thoughts, many of which were not even true. Wasn't it Mark Twain who supposedly said something similar, that troubles are only mental? It is the mind that manufactures them, the mind that can gorge them, banish them, and abolish them. So when I was able to abolish the thoughts that created suffering, I then found it was so much easier to access states of peace, joy, inspiration, courage, states of being that were crucial for me in navigating a chaotic and challenging life in a chaotic and challenging world. That is why I consider mind management, minding my mind, as one of the primary components of my spiritual practice. And that's why I felt so validated and excited when I realized that a foundational component of the Way of the Bodhisattva, a seminal classic Buddhist text, was in many ways all about protecting and guarding the mind. Here is a monk writing in the 8th century, identifying what cognitive behavioral theorists would confirm over 1,000 years later. And what I would also find out in my little post-divorce life, that our mind and our thoughts matter, Those thoughts generate feelings, and those feelings will impact how we behave and how we experience our world. But don't just take my word for it. I wouldn't expect you to anyway. I'm just the intern. I would, however, encourage you to check out the words of Dr. Jill Bolte Taylor. You may already be familiar with Jill Bolte Taylor. She made the rounds on all major media outlets and even an appearance on Oprah following the release of her book back in 2009, My Stroke of Insight. For those who aren't familiar with her, Jill Bolte Taylor was a trained and published neuroanatomist in the mid-1990s. Her fascination with the brain began early in her life as she wanted to better understand what made her brain different from her older brother, who had shown obvious signs of psychosis for many years and was later diagnosed with schizophrenia. So she completed her undergraduate degree, bypassed a master's degree, going straight into 6 years of PhD work. She was offered a postdoctoral research position at Harvard Medical School in the Department of Neuroscience, later transferring into the Harvard Medical School Department of Psychiatry. She was also deeply involved with NAMI, the National Alliance on Mental Health. And in fact, in 1994, when she was only 35 years old, she was appointed to the National Board of Directors. Clearly, she was a rising star in her field. And then, just 2 years later, in 1996, she suffered an incredibly rare form of hemorrhagic stroke that took the left hemisphere of her brain entirely offline. She chronicles the whole experience, her pre-stroke life, the stroke itself, her time in the hospital, her 8-year recovery, and her post-stroke life in the book, My Stroke of Insight. So for our purposes, I want to share what Bolte Taylor's experience tells us about minding our mind. So unlike most folks who have a stroke, Bolte Taylor knew pretty quickly what was happening on that morning in 1996. In the instant she realized, I'm having a stroke, the next thought that flashed through her mind was, wow, how cool. How many scientists have the opportunity to study their own brain function and mental deterioration from the inside out? In any event, thankfully, she was able to get help. And then she watched as her left brain language centers slowly shut down. Her brain chatter went silent. Memories of the past and dreams of the future evaporated. She couldn't even recognize her physical form. And when she was told that her mother, Gigi, would be arriving soon, she didn't understand the significance of Gigi. She had lost the concept of what a mother was. Her full recovery took 8 years, during which time she had to learn everything all over again. Walk, talk, read, write, everything. She was, as she put it, a child in a woman's body. Now, you might be thinking at this point, God, what a tragedy. But in fact, Bolte Taylor calls it a blessing. Unlike the rest of us, she had an extended period without the chatter generated by our left brain. And through that experience, she received what she calls a stroke of insight. Namely, she discovered that by silencing the voice of our dominating left mind, peace is only a thought away. You see, as her left brain language centers recovered and became functional again during that 8 years, she was able to watch kind of as an observer, unlike the rest of us who are usually wholly and completely identifying with that storyteller in our left brain. She observed that her storyteller left brain would draw conclusions based on minimal information. She said she found the antics of this storyteller to be rather comical, until that is, she realized that her left mind full-heartedly expected the rest of her brain and being to believe the stories it was making up. And that left brain, she said, had a tendency not only for stirring up drama and trauma, but also to be redundant, manifesting loops of thoughts that reverberated through her mind over and over and over again. So as her left brain came back online, she made conscious decisions to leave behind certain emotional circuits and thought patterns that didn't serve who she now wanted to be. She writes that there has been nothing more empowering than the realization she doesn't have to think the thoughts that bring her pain. Now, you might be thinking, well, this is all very inspiring, but my left brain has been online the whole time. I can't just pick and choose what I'm thinking. You would be right in that it's not easy and thoughts do just arrive. But deciding whether we hook into them and keep thinking them on loop That's doable, which is why Bolte Taylor compares managing the mind to tending a garden. She writes, "I view the garden in my mind as a sacred patch of cosmic real estate that the universe has entrusted to me to tend over the years of my lifetime. Regardless of the garden I have inherited, once I consciously take over responsibility of tending my mind, I choose to nurture those circuits that I want to grow and prune back the circuits I prefer to live without. If I want to retain my inner peace, I must be willing to consistently and persistently tend the garden of my mind moment by moment and be willing to make the decision 1,000 times a day." I get this. It took me years to get the weeds in the garden of my mind cleaned up around my ex-husband. And I can attest that in my current life, it is a daily, persistent, consistent effort using all kinds of modalities to manage my mind, Byron Katie's system of inquiry being just one of many tools. And Jill Bolte Taylor does share some of her own preferred techniques and tools in the book as well. That could be a whole separate sermon for another day. We just don't have time for it here. But as we do draw to a close, I'm going to share one thing that Jill Bolte Taylor and I both do to manage our minds. We pay attention to what we're tuning into. So you may have heard of the Harvard University gorilla experiment. It's on a selective attention. In this experiment, participants were asked to watch a short video in which 6 people are passing basketballs back and forth. Kind of looks like an NBA team, but not that talented. 3 of the people passing the basketballs were wearing white shirts. 3 of them were wearing black shirts. Now, the participants watching the video were asked to keep a silent count of the number of passes made by those people in the white shirts. The correct answer was 15 passes. But then the researchers asked, "Did you see the gorilla in the video?" You see, halfway through the short video, a person in a gorilla costume walks through the middle of the folks, right into the middle, stops, beats his chest, and then continues walking outside of the frame. If you are hearing this, you're probably thinking, well, of course I would see that gorilla. But half the participants missed the gorilla entirely. And I'm going to confess, when I watched the video the first time, I didn't see the gorilla. This experiment was not in Jill Bolte Taylor's book, but it does validate something she says. Namely, our minds are highly sophisticated, seek and ye shall find instruments. We are designed to focus in on whatever we're looking for. So when I only looked for the bad in my husband, for example, I found it everywhere. And much like I missed the gorilla in the video, I missed my husband's good until I focused my mind in that direction after we divorced. So as you manage your mind, what are you tuning into? Are you asking your mind to focus in a direction that is life-giving or life-draining? And one of the places Jill Bolte Taylor tunes into is right here. When she had her stroke, she didn't just lose her left brain, she gained an awareness of the right hemisphere of her brain that she'd never had before. Without the dominant left brain in the driver's seat, she was living fully in only her right brain. As she describes it, her consciousness soared into all-knowingness, a being at one with the universe. Her perception of her physical skin boundary disappeared and she felt like a genie liberated from a bottle. She says it was sweet tranquility, pure bliss, and no fear. She wondered how she would again exist as a member of the human race with this heightened perception that we are each a part of it all and that the life force energy within each of us contains the power of the universe. Pretty trippy stuff. But it actually mirrors research performed by doctors Andrew Newberg and Eugene Dikili on Tibetan monks and Franciscan nuns. Their research identified the neuroanatomy underlying the human ability to have a spiritual or mystical experience and feel at one with the universe or God or the Great Spirit or whatever you want to call it. We're hardwired for this. So with that trippy experience and knowing her right brain could do this, Jill Bolte Taylor now makes a concerted effort to do what she calls stepping to the right, basically stepping into the consciousness of her right hemisphere. There, she says she finds a peaceful, loving mind. her intuition and higher consciousness, the seat of her divine mind, the knower, the wise woman, the observer. Sounds pretty good to me. So we'll end here. You know the challenges the world is facing. You know the challenges you are facing in your own life. In what mental state and in what feeling state are you most effective in problem solving and navigating these challenges? If you believe Shanti Deva and Jill Bolte Taylor, peace, maybe even joy, may still be possible in the face of these challenges. How will you mind your mind to find out? And so it is. I invite you now to rise in body and spirit and sing hymn number 1028, The Fire of Commitment. And now, as we extinguish the chalice, I invite you to read with me the words printed in your order of service for extinguishing the chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. And now, as we go back out into the world, may we lovingly and persistently tend the garden that is our mind. May we connect with the highest and wisest aspects of our mind. May we courageously mind our mind. And so it is.